Good evening to all of you. I am Ankur Chaudhary, and during the course of this session, we will be covering very basics of Indian economy and a couple of macroeconomic theoretical concepts as well, which are very important for you to understand. To understand the various trends and forces that are under debate or being debated as far as the Indian economy is concerned. Okay, so a couple of instructions before we move ahead with the lecture. First, make sure you have your pen and paper ready at hand. This is going to be a very content, I wouldn't say rich, right? I'm not so immodest, but content heavy session. So make sure you're writing continuously. And second thing, I'll be taking your questions in three separate intervals, three separate question and answer rounds rather. So we're starting the lecture at 6:30. First question and answer will be at 7 p.m. then at 7:30, and then all your remaining queries I'll answer at the end of the lecture at 8 o'clock, right? So we'll take all the time. I'll put in all the time that you need and get all your queries answered at 8 p.m. right? Okay, Rajul, you'll be having a separate session on the budget, right? And so this is budget as far as the union budget is concerned. That is not part of this presentation, this video lecture. You'll have a separate special lecture on union budget, right? So guys, another bit of instruction, please limit your queries only to the content of this presentation. Don't ask me about international relations. We have a separate lecture on that. Don't ask me about socio-political issues, some GSTs, etc. We have separate sessions on that. So just limit your queries to only the things that are being spoken about in this presentation. Okay, so before we begin, let's just first understand what economics is all about. So some of you from economics background or who have studied economics as a subject in graduation, 11th and 12th, you must have read the purely theoretical definition of economics. But over here, we are more concerned about the practical applications or practical understanding of what the subject economics is all about, right? So it is a science which studies human behavior, right? So the subject over here is human behavior, and as such human behavior, you all understand, is very unpredictable, and as a relationship between ends, that is various goals. So goals can be that of an individual, for example, to earn more money, and the goals can be of the society also, for example, to achieve greater growth rates of the GDP. And the scarce means, now this is very important. Whatever the means that we have, or the resources rather, they are scarce, they have alternative uses, and economics is all about making decisions on how to prioritize the use of the scarce resources that we have at hand. If the resources would have been abundant, or there was no limit to those resources, then there would have been no need for economics as such, right? Scarce means which have alternative uses. So for example, the recently held union budget exercise, we understood that we have limited amount of financial resources. So the finance minister or the Ministry of Finance has to prioritize in what fields or in what schemes do they have to put in more money, or some and conversely have to reduce in some other schemes. So most of this we've already discussed earlier, but just let's just recap this again. Central problems of economics: the problem of allocation of resources, right? So again, which particular scheme, for example, you've seen Manrega has seen the largest allocation ever, rupees 48,000 crore. So that is a decision related to economics. Problem of fuller utilization of resources. So for example, since the past few years, the theme of a major theme of the budgets has been related to subsidies. Again, subsidies are really being talked about in the economic survey, recently released economic survey as well, right? The problem with subsidies, the subsidy regime in India, is that we are spending about 4.5% of the total GDP on subsidies. Subsidies are given on fuel, fertilizer and food items. However, the problem is, even though we are spending so much money, it's not really benefiting the people who it's supposed to target. So there are a lot of inefficiencies due to corruption, leakages, etc. So that leads to a suboptimal utilization of resources. Now another suggestion that our economic survey has given is related to universal basic income, right? So that is suggested to replace the subsidy regime, right? It's only in the preliminary stages, universal basic income. That is suggested, that is recommended that it would replace the subsidy regime in India, and it would lead to fuller or more efficient utilization of our financial and human resources. So that is also one major concern of economics. Next is the problem of growth of resources. Now recently again, after the move on demonetization, you've seen the growth figures of the Indian economy being revised on the lower side. So for example, IMF has given revised it to 6.6%, right? Whereas the economic survey 2016-2017 is expecting the economy to grow at 6.75 to approximately 7.15%. So that is also related to the area that is economics. So after understanding the various problems or of various objectives or various issues related to economics, next we look at certain systems within economics in which these decisions are made. These are based on certain ideologies which dictate how better utilization of resources is done, how it is ensured the prioritization of resources is done, and secondly how to ensure an economy grows. Yes, so first one is capitalism. So I'm sure most of you have heard this name. Capitalism is an economic system which gives priority to private ownership or private property, right? So there is no concept of public property or government ownership in this particular system. So there will be no PSUs like BSNL, Air India, etc. and only privately owned enterprises will exist in such a system. Now what are the various other features of this system? So next topic is features of capitalism. First is profit maximization is the objective. Every single businessman would be looking for profit maximization. Secondly, as I've said earlier, there will be a recognition of private property. Thirdly, the government will not intervene in any capacity in the market forces. Fourthly, there will be a free hand given to the market forces of demand and supply. That means if the demand of a particular good is rising, the prices will continue to rise and the businessman or the producer would continue to reap the benefits of profits. Conversely, if the demand of a particular good is going down, it is absolutely the government will not extend any kind of support to the producer, and the producer will have to shut down his or her own shop. Next, let us look at the advantages of capitalism. First is it will lead to higher economic growth. Now because everyone is going after profits, naturally economic growth figures of a nation, of the system, would naturally be high. Secondly, because everyone is going after profit, everyone is trying to sell his or her more and more of his products. The capitalism as such breeds creativity and innovation, right? So for example, you have a very ready example at hand, the mobile set market, right? So continuously it is evolving, innovating and creating to get more and more of the market share. Thirdly, because people are innovating, so the customers are very happy because they get a lot of choices as far as the products are concerned. So next advantage is product differentiation. Next, of course, since everyone is trying to beat the competition, every single company or producer would try to make a better quality product, so consumers benefit again, they'll get better quality products. Okay, next we look at the disadvantages of capitalism. First one, of course, as Nishant has already pointed out, monopolies or not so good market practices, right? So capitalism will breed monopolies, oligopolies, etc., which are not good market practices, right? Secondly, capitalism would ignore certain sectors which are not profitable. For example, related to social welfare. So because everyone in capitalism is looking to earn more and more money, nobody would be investing, for example, in building a school in far away northeast or a village in northeast, one of the northeastern states, because very less number of people are living over there and the incomes of people is quite low, right? So certain sectors like primary health, education, etc. would not get the adequate attention in capitalism as compared to another system. Another problem with capitalism is, and which eventually led to its downfall, is exploitation of workers. Now the people who are the owners of factories, right, they would be looking to increase their profits. There are two ways to do it. Either they create certain products whose demands is continuously rising, or secondly they reduce their expenditure or costs. So while reducing their costs, people, the owners of the factories, would try and minimize the wages of their workers. So that would lead to exploitation of workers, which happened in right after industrial revolution in Europe, and due to this was a major criticism of capitalism. Another alternative system arose, that is called socialism, right? So socialism rose due to the negatives of capitalism. So let's look at what socialism is all about. The idea was made famous by a very prominent thinker called Karl Marx. Guys, again, please limit your queries. Ask me your questions after 15 minutes. Keep noting them down. It won't be possible for me to stop and answer every query, right? Okay. So this prominent thinker from Germany, he popularized the idea of socialism as against capitalism. So in socialism, this is exactly opposite to capitalism. Everything is owned by the state or the nation. There is no concept of private property, right? So first we talk about the advantages of socialism. First thing, there would be no unemployment in socialist system because the government is duty bound to provide jobs, livelihoods to all its citizens. Secondly, as we saw in capitalism, there would not be any single sector which would be left out in a socialist system. The government will take care of producing, of establishing schools, hospitals, etc. because profit is not the motive in socialism, right? Next we talk about the negatives of socialism. First, of course, because everything is owned by the government and the state, there would be a lot of corruption in this particular system, and that is what we have seen throughout our history as well. We'll talk a bit more about that in subsequent slides. And second disadvantage of socialism is it won't breed any kind of innovation or creativity. So for example, when Indian economy before 1991, it was not socialist but something called socialistic, that is like socialism. So at that particular point in time, we had just one producer of automobiles, for example Maruti, and before that Fiat, one producer of scooters, etc. Right? So there would not be any competition in the market. People would be getting only one kind of product from one producer, that is the government. So there would be a net loss to the customer because he does not have any choices as far as different kind of products are concerned, and the quality of product will also not be very good. So next disadvantage of socialism is a socialist economy is that it would lead to very low economic growth rates in the country because people are not running after profits. So those are certain disadvantages of socialism. Next, if we plot a continuum or a graph, as we've understood, capitalism can be, if capitalism is on one side, then socialism is absolutely on the opposite end, right? So socialism is on the one end of the spectrum, capitalism is on the other end of the spectrum. So we also understood that there were a lot of problems with both of these systems. So a new system, a kind of a hybrid, emerged called mixed economy. So as the name suggests, it has the advantages of both capitalism and socialism. It combined the better points of both the systems, right? So just for your understanding, if you want to plot, let us say USSR over here, the USSR would be lying somewhere very close to socialism, right? but also it had certain capitalistic tendencies. So they would, socialism and capitalism, they are ideal types, right? They are perfect models of, they are theoretical models. So practically speaking, there has been no country in our history which has been perfectly socialist. But if you want to plot USSR, still again it would be tending towards socialism, but with some bit of some features of capitalism as well. So when you talk about USA, we can plot it somewhere over here, very close to capitalism, but it also had a social welfare measure, it still does, called Obamacare, right? So again, Obamacare is government giving health insurance to its people. That is a very socialistic kind of a trait. So again, USA also of today, although it is tending towards capitalism, it has certain features of socialism as well. So when you talk about India, Daksh, I think he's only spoken about it, no official order has been given out. So let's see what he does. So when you talk about India pre-1991, that is before the LPG reforms, India was a socialistic economy, right? But after the LPG reforms of 91, that is liberalization, privatization and globalization, India has shifted more towards capitalism and can be plotted today somewhere over here, right? So this is the broad understanding of various economic systems. Mixed economy system, they have certain advantages because some social welfare measures are also taken care of. For example, we have government schools and government hospitals. However, most of the economic activity is left for the private sector to operate in, right? Next, the poor and the disadvantaged people are taken care of by the government, while the rich people are, theoretically at least, not are given absolute freedom to do whatever they want to, right? So that is how mixed economy is, combining the advantages of both capitalism and socialism. So next we look at certain important terms using which we measure the health of an economy. First one, of course, is gross domestic product or GDP. It is a total value of all final goods and services produced within the territory of a country within a year, right? Let me repeat, it is the total value of all final goods and services produced within the territory of a country within a year. Two very important terms here, final goods and services. Final goods are, of course, as opposed to intermediate goods. Final goods are those which are used within the form as by the end consumer. So for example, if I am purchasing some raw material and manufacturing a finished product, so the cost that I am going to procure the raw material, that will not be counted in the GDP, but the value at which I am selling it to my customer who will be using it for himself or herself, that value will be included as far as GDP is concerned. Next is net domestic product. Okay, sorry, let me just go back to GDP. So I've already explained what final goods and services are. Another important term that I used was within the territory of a country. So GDP is a territorial concept. That is, the foreigners who are spending money in India to buy products which they'll be using for themselves, that money will be included in India's GDP. Conversely, the NRIs or the Indians who are spending money abroad, that money would not be included and would be subtracted rather from India's gross domestic product, right? Next, whenever the term net comes, there is a very standard thumb rule. So net domestic product is equal to GDP minus depreciation. Depreciation, for the understanding of our engineer friends, right, or people from not from commerce background, depreciation is nothing accounting concept. It is related to the devaluation in the value of an asset, which can be a factory, etc., or machinery, due to normal wear and tear, right? So there's nothing to worry about this concept, only this much understanding is enough. Next, earlier we saw that GDP is a territorial concept. Next, our next concept is gross national product. it is based on the nationality of the producer, right? So let's note down the definition of GNP. It is a total value of all final goods and services produced by the nationals of a country in a year. So the foreigners who are producing in India and selling their goods and services in the country, that would be subtracted, and the Indians who are working outside of India and producing and earning some money, that value would be added to calculate our GNP, that is gross national product. Similarly, as I explained earlier, net national product would be your GNP, that is gross national product minus depreciation. Guys, if you want to note down certain things, you can note down, or you can just take a screenshot of the presentation also, especially data related to this particular table, right? So when you talk about GDP, which is at nominal rates or exchange rates, India has about $2.3 trillion of GDP. India has recently climbed to rank 6th by overtaking England. England, of course, is facing a slowdown after Brexit. So we have overtaken England very recently. Next is GDP at PPP, or purchasing power parity, right? When you talk about this, the GDP is almost 4 times at $8.72 trillion, and in PPP terms we are ranked 3rd only after USA and China. So some of you must be wondering what this purchasing power parity is all about. So let me just give you a very brief example. So let us assume today $1 is equal to, let us say, we'll round off the figure, rupees 70, right? So supposing you have $10 in USA and consequently 700 rupees in India. So all of you can very well imagine, you staying in India, you can buy more stuff with 700 rupees as compared to the stuff that you can buy using $10 in USA. So you can get more goods or services in 700 rupees in India as compared to while spending $10 in the USA. Now that difference arises, right? That difference arises due to the difference in standard of living, or rather cost of living. Cost of living, right? Okay. So if we are comparing the economies of different countries, for example India, China, USA, Pakistan, etc., right, it would not make sense to just compare their dollar GDPs when the conversion takes place using the normal exchange rates in the market. What we have to do for it to make sense is to assign a lesser value of rupee per dollar to take care or to get rid of this factor, that is difference in cost of living. So this factor is approximately, when you talk about India's case, so in USA the cost of living is almost 4 times that of India. So what we do is we divide the exchange rate by 4. Okay, so that comes out to be approximately $1 is equal to around 17 to 18 rupees, right? So let's have the same situation again. You have $10 in USA and consequently 170 rupees, you convert them into rupees using this particular exchange rate. You have 170 rupees in India. Now this is approximately equal. You can get the equal amount of goods in $10 in USA and 170 rupees in India. So PPP is nothing but an adjustment that we make in the exchange rate due to the difference in cost of living of different countries. Now after we do that, it enables us to clearly compare the different economies because there is no difference due to cost of living. These are some more figures. GDP per capita when calculated at purchasing power parity comes out to be approximately $6,658. Right, growth rate that we've seen in the previous year adjusted also, which has been adjusted now at 7.6%. Unemployment rate at 5%. Population below poverty line according to World Bank estimates in 2011 is 21.3%. And these are your trading figures. Samarth, division by 4 is an approximate, right? Because see, GDP at nominal it's 2.3, so approximately it is slightly less than 4, of course, but close to 4 actual things. Ankush, very good question. Socialism is a very broad concept. Marxism is a small part of socialism, right? But in this lecture we will not go deeper into that. That is more related to politics. So let's just finish this particular slide and then I'll take your questions. Okay. So GDP at official exchange rate or the nominal GDP. This we've already seen, 2.3 trillion. USA is almost 8 to 9 times of Indian economy, and then China again almost 5 times of Indian economy. These are certain figures you'll be doing very well if you are quoting them in your GDs and PATs, right? So you will use them to substantiate your arguments. Next, when you talk about purchasing power parity, 8.72 trillion for India, 18.56, which is the same, right, for USA, and as far as China is concerned, it is $21.3 trillion, right? So China is ranked 1 as far as PPP is concerned. Yes, Nishant, it is a standard to use the cost of living as far as USA is concerned. Then GDP per purchasing power parity, 6,658 for India, right? Approximately $57,000 per year for USA and $16,000 for India. So when you talk about India's future or prospects to become economic superpower, you quote these figures and you can very well imagine, you can very well understand that we have a lot of ground to cover before we can call ourselves a world economic superpower. These are the growth rate figures of 15 and 16 of all these economies, right? Of course, USA is a developed economy, so it has some bit of stagnation. So that is why developed economies always grow at a much slower rate when you compare them to developing economies like China and India. Again, unemployment rate next is below poverty line. Maybe some of you are wondering how come USA the figure is so high. Of course, the poverty line in every country is defined in relative terms, right? So as far as USA is concerned, per annum, right, per annum the poverty line in PPP terms is $40,000. That is much higher than even some of the placements that you'll be getting from IIMs. Okay, let's hope not. Okay, so these are certain export and import figures, right? So China again, so one of you has already mentioned, they are very high. Of course, China is considered to be the factory of the world, the manufacturing hub of the world, right? So that is why it is an export dependent economy. That is why its exports are very high. But some of you may be surprised, its imports are also quite high as well, right? $1.7 trillion, because pretty much like India, China is also an energy deficient and energy hungry country. So it is importing a lot of oil, natural gas, etc. from across the world. That is why its imports are very high. Again, when you talk about USA, its imports are much higher because its market is pretty much saturated, right? So there are no new manufacturing units which are being set up in the USA, which is a big problem as far as Trump is concerned. So he's trying to get those jobs back to USA. That might be a problem because really the market is saturated. That is why companies are moving out. USA prefers importing rather than producing within its territory. So let's see where that goes. Okay. So as far as imports are concerned, India's imports are very high, because the largest contribution of our imports are related to oil and natural gas imports, right? Because India does not have quite a lot of deposits of oil and natural gas or crude oil. India is importing approximately 80% of its oil needs every single year. So the second item of import, of course, is gold, which us Indians are crazy about. Okay, so I'll take your questions now. Mr. H. Sangvi, so can we buy more goods in Chinese yen while compared to India and US according to GDP based on PPP? I'm not able to make sense of what you've asked. So can you please rephrase that? Guys, please refrain from commenting. Just ask questions. Ravikaran, these figures are for the previous year 15-16, right? 16-17 figures, of course, they have not come out yet. Rajul, there is a slight difference between communism and socialism, but that is more in the domain of political science. As far as economics is concerned, consider both of them to be the same, right? We won't get into that. Shivashish, a very basic doubt. You said in capitalist state they won't focus on healthcare, school, etc. But aren't they basic things which is must for continuous growth? A very, very important point. See, if I am a businessman in a capitalistic state, I would set up hospitals like Max, Fortis, Alchemist, or Escorts, etc. Right? Huge hospitals, and because my basic aim is not to serve the public, but to get more and more profit. Right, so it would make sense for me to set up hospitals in huge centers like, let us say, Chandigarh, Delhi, Mumbai, Calcutta, Bangalore, and other larger cities. But just think about it, will they actually set up a hospital in smaller villages of India? Right? Because everything is owned by private individuals, and private individuals would always look after or go after profit. So that is the basic disadvantage, and your basic needs would not be covered by the private sector. Nishant asked, sir, could you tell us which major economies are socialistic? I think I've already covered this particular aspect. Some major economies, again, you can take the example of China. China is a very strange system. Politically, it is communist, right? Because there is only one political party. No other political parties are allowed. But in terms of economic system, they are following a capitalist system. Okay, Rajul asked difference between socialist and socialistic. So socialistic is close to socialism. So for example, realistic is close to real, right? That is how socialistic comes from. Ranbir, what constitutes most of India's exports? As far as India is concerned, engineered goods, right? For example, automobiles, heavy machinery, etc. This is getting the most of export revenue for us. Kelsier, yes, of course, refined fuels is also a significant portion of our exports. Savneet asks, defense equipment will also form a large part of imports for India. Yes, it is a substantial amount, but not a significant amount. I've just told you the first two, oil and gold. Okay, then Daksh is, what type of economy is UK? UK is of course more of a capitalist economy as compared to socialism. Pratham Mani asks, sir, is it completely true that capitalist economies don't focus in certain social sectors? Because, for example, Tata have built hospitals and educational institutes even though they are profitable. See, again, what I've told you is capitalism and socialism, the definition, how I've explained it to you is, they are theoretical models, right? So everything else lies in between. Okay, so you have to understand that. So it's absolutely fine when Tata is building hospitals. However, you have to take into consideration that India recently passed an amendment in the Companies Act, making it compulsory for all the companies in the country to contribute 2% of their profit into CSR activities, that is corporate social responsibilities. So Tata as a company is very different. We cannot expect in a capitalistic system for every company to be investing as much into social welfare as Tata is doing. Nishant, no, when a foreign firm is selling its products, that is its revenues, right? Those will not be counted in GNP, whether irrespective of the fact if it employs Indian labor or not. Yes, Santosh, definitely our services are also included. One of the major exports of India is the software and IT sector, that is the services sector. Ranbir asks, does exports and imports only refer to goods or services? Yes, of course, services are also included. Rajul, doesn't unemployment 5% seem too less? I mean, 20% are BPL and only 5% unemployed. Okay, there are some, these figures are absolutely authentic. I've taken them down from economic survey itself. For example, there is a lot of disguised unemployment in India. So those people will not be included in the actually unemployed, but they are in fact unemployed, right? Yes, absolutely, Samarth. Liberal economy is a feature of capitalistic society. So yes, if we're increasing our FDIs, then we are tending more towards capitalism as opposed to socialism. So any more question, guys, before we move forward? The way, yes, higher the GDP, obviously the more money a country is making, the better it is. So moving on, economic planning in India. Of course, I won't be focusing too much on this because the Planning Commission has now been abolished, right? So let me just answer one last question before we move on. If that is the case, inflation clearly increases the GDP but is also unhealthy. So you have to balance out the two things, right? Of course, when the GDP is going high, inflation will also go up, right? So you have to ensure a balance between the two. That is why the RBI is kept separate, and that is RBI is given the authority to control the money supply in the country, and the economic fiscal policy is done by the central government, right? Again, there has to be a balance between economic growth and inflation. So moving on, guys, economic planning in India is indicative, not imperative, right? That means that economic planning was not dictated, but it was only indicative or certain guidelines, right? Planning Commission, which has now been abolished, was established in 1950. It formulated 5-year plans. The last 5-year plan or the current 5-year plan which is going on is the 12th 5-year plan. So that would be the last plan that the Planning Commission made. So NDA abolished the Planning Commission in August 2014 and is replaced it by Niti Aayog. That is the National Institute for Transforming India. Right? There were major conflicts between Planning Commission and another constitutional body called Finance Commission. Right? So various controversies were. Planning Commission used to decide planned expenditure, which became a political nature. So if there was one government in the center, that central government would not allocate adequate funds to state in which the opposition party was ruling. Next is NDA is National Democratic Alliance, led by BJP. So there were recent controversies as far as Planning Commission was concerned, one that I have already spoken about, and now it has been replaced by Niti Aayog. So Niti Aayog is now a recommendatory body, and it is also known as a policy think tank. So what it would do is, it would include certain experts, which may be economists, lawyers, teachers, etc., to give recommendation on certain policy decisions of the government. For example, if there is one problem for if a new policy has to be made in relation to intellectual property rights, so experts from this field will be picked up. They would submit a report to the government, and it is up to the government whether it listens to their advice or not. So it is entirely recommendatory in nature. Earlier, the Planning Commission used to recommend granting of certain funds. So this power has also been taken away from the Niti Aayog. Right. So these are certain important figures of the plans. Some of them are more important than others. I'll discuss the second 5-year plan. Right. So planning in its true sense started in the second 5-year plan. Right. And this is because we adopted a particular model of development called Mahalanobis model. He's also known as the father of statistics in India, Mr. P.C. Mahalanobis. So what he recommended was, rather than focusing on uplifting all the Indians out of poverty, because at the time of our independence, 99% of Indians were considered to be below poverty line. So he suggested, if we go after removing poverty, we will not be able to grow at all. Right? So what we have to do is, we have to be tolerable towards poverty and focus on heavy and basic industries. This is related to steel, textiles, etc. Right? So you focus on these industries, that is the top, and the growth will trickle down to the bottom, because for example, if textile industry is going well, they will create more demand for our farmers, especially cotton farmers, and the income would go to them. So the growth will trickle down from top to the bottom. That is why this theory is also known as trickle down theory. Next important 5-year plan is of course the 5th 5-year plan. So by the 1970s we realized that trickle down theory is not working very well. There is a increasing concentration of wealth at the top, and that wealth is not percolating down to the bottom. So at that time the Prime Minister decided that the trickle down theory or the PC Mahalanobis model has to be abandoned, and a straight a fight has to be fought against poverty directly, right? So in the 5th 5-year plan, poverty was made the major target of our planning. The idea of trickle down theory is that rather than focusing on 99% poor people, you focus on the 1% who are at the top, right? Develop certain industries like textile and steel, right? These are the industries which would create demand for what is being produced by the poor people in India, for example by the farmers. So the example that I took was, if the textile industry is strong, then the demand for cotton farmers would be high and the income will percolate towards them, right? So that is why if we focus on the top, the growth will trickle down to the bottom. Next important 5-year plan is the 8th 5-year plan. This is very important because this was a plan right after the LPG reforms, right? So again, LPG reforms I'll be covering in detail, so you'll get better idea then. So currently we are in the 12th 5-year plan, which is almost over with, right? Okay, these were certain targets for the 12th 5-year plan, so just indicative for you now, right? Important one was India needs a lot of money in infrastructure sector. Yes, Aarti, you have a question from this? Yes, of course, these are CAGRs. So I hope you've taken a snapshot. Okay, so India needs a lot of money as far as infrastructure is concerned, right? Even till today, recently we had the visit of Crown Prince of UAE. We hope to sign a deal of worth $75 billion, which we were not able to do this time around, but we'll soon be finalizing that. That is to be invested in infrastructure sector. So we need a lot of money in our infrastructure, and that is why approximately $1 trillion it was estimated investment which was needed in infrastructure. 12th 5-year plan, more investment in health and education, better targeting of subsidies. This we've already done in case of direct benefit transfers, in case of LPGs, etc. Right? And then bringing down poverty ratio by 10%. So let's see when the new figures come in how much we've succeeded in that. So I was talking about direct cash transfer. Let's do that in detail and how it is beneficial to our economy. Right, so I'm sure how you all know how direct cash transfer works, but let's understand the advantages. So in case of food subsidies, earlier the system was related to PDS, that is public distribution system. Under this system, certain ration shops or fair price shops were established, right? So from these fair price shops, the beneficiaries or the people or the poor people could go and buy cheaper grain or sugar or kerosene from, right? So what the problem with the PDS was, right? So let's just take an example of wheat. For example, wheat is being sold in the open market, let's say for instance at 15 rupees per kg. In fair price shop, the price is at rupees 3 per kg. So the government, if you talk about per kg, the government is giving an advantage of rupees 12 to each beneficiary, right? But what was really happening is the fair price shop would get cheap grain from the government, and he or the person would be diverting that and selling it off at this particular rate in the market, and that created a lot of corruption, pilferages and leakages. So what direct benefit transfer does is, the basic objective is giving 12 rupees benefit to the user or the beneficiary. So what the government does is directly transfers this 12 rupees into the accounts of the beneficiary, and that eliminates the need of a fair price shop. Now the person is empowered to purchase directly from the market at market costs. So what that does is it reduces corruption, pilferages and leakages. Secondly, as a beneficiary, I have more choices in terms of where to buy my grain or food from. Thirdly, there will be more customers who should be buying in the market, and that would lead to greater competition amongst shopkeepers. So if there is one particular shopkeeper which I am not happy with, I will switch over. If there is one particular shopkeeper who is not giving very good quality wheat, I'll go to the next one. What that would do is create competition in the market and better quality of products, right? So that is the major advantage of direct cash transfers. So it is currently being done in LPG and Manrega also. Again, the problem with Manrega related schemes was people or government official would not release the payment to the beneficiary without a bribe. So that need is also eliminated. So we eliminated the middleman in the system by giving direct cash transfers, right? Next, we look at the various sectors of our economy: agriculture, industry and services. So this particular table is comparing three countries again: India, USA and China. This particular row gives the figures as far as the percentage of GDP contribution of each sector is concerned, and the second is percentage of population employed in one particular sector. So there are certain imbalances as far as Indian economy is concerned. The first and most glaring one is this one: approximately 50% of our population contributing just 19% to the economy. This is because agriculture is a low productivity economic activity, right? Next, again, a bit of imbalance we see over here. So only 27% of our population contributing almost 50% to the economy. This is of course because services sector is a highly productive economic activity, right? Next, we look at China. Again, a similar problem exists. A lot of people are involved in agriculture and contributing too little, because they are also developing and they are also employing certain traditional modes of agriculture which are not very productive. Similarly, if you look at USA, this figure is approximately equal, because in USA the farms are highly mechanized, right, and they are using modern methods of agriculture. So it is not poorly productive as compared to agriculture in India and China. Let's look at the industry sector as far as China is concerned. It is highly productive, right? It is highly productive, and similarly is the case with services as well. Yes, Ayush, industry means manufacturing sector, right? So when you talk about India's economy, we are continuously trying to shift more and more people from, let us say, agriculture to manufacturing, right? Now this is especially because that agriculture is low in productivity, manufacturing is higher in productivity. There is another advantage of manufacturing, that it is highly skill intensive. It is highly labor intensive. It is highly labor intensive. What that means is manufacturing sector has the potential to absorb unskilled labor, semi-skilled labor, highly skilled labor and researcher level labor as well, right? So it is highly labor intensive. So that is why we are trying to shift more and more people towards manufacturing by schemes like Make in India. Guys, please, I'll take your questions in 5 or 7 minutes. Please be patient, right? So Make in India is focusing on increasing the number of jobs in the manufacturing sector. Now a question may arise, why not focus on the services sector? Again, the answer is here. Services sector, for example, information technology, education, coaching institutes, etc., they are highly skill intensive. They do not have the potential to absorb all kinds of labors like unskilled and semi-skilled as well. That advantage exists only in the manufacturing sector. That is why we focus on Make in India. Okay, let's take your questions before we move forward. What is the difference between services sector in USA and India? Why the ratio of GDP of USA to percentage of population is that low? Again, a very important question that Ravi Kiran has raised. So as far as USA is concerned, their services sector is related to R&D. So that involves a lot of investments, and it's not a lot of capital as such. So that is why the difference exists. So Arzu, services are not labor intensive. We have an excess of surplus of labor in agriculture. If we want them to move out of agriculture, we have to shift them to manufacturing, which would absorb unskilled labor, for example a worker in a factory, right, and all kinds of laborers. Services sector does not have that kind of advantage. Services sector as such requires a highly qualified educated individual. Rajul, why would people shift from agriculture to industry? Again, agriculture is highly subsidized in India. Shouldn't we reduce farm subsidies to push Make in India campaign? Again, Rajul, the idea is quite good, but again we have politics to consider as well. It's not very easy to take away subsidies, especially in agriculture. But again, agriculture sector needs a lot of subsidies as well, because a lot of farmers in India are quite vulnerable. Most of them are dependent on rain for their for water needs of their crops. Again, if we remove subsidies from them, it will be very difficult for their lives. Akash, does shifting focus to manufacturing will do justice to farmers? But of course, Akash, because farmers are not able to gain economically by sticking to agriculture. Now what is happening is a lot of disguised unemployment in our agriculture. 10 people working on a piece of land in which only one person is enough, right? So farmers, they are not sticking to agriculture out of choice. They are doing it out of compulsion, because there are no other economic activities closer to home that they can get involved in. So again, they would be doing themselves a great justice if we are able to provide, if the government is able to provide alternative jobs to farmers beyond agriculture. Rajul, again a very important point that you raise. So WTO has different kinds of subsidies. WTO allows subsidies to be given to producers, but not to consumers, right? So again I repeat, WTO allows for a government to give subsidies to producers, that is farmers, and not to consumers, that is people like us. So WTO, we are violating WTO norms, yes, by giving direct benefit transfers to the people, because people would be eventual consumers. However, if we are subsidizing the farmer, that is absolutely according to the WTO rules. Any more questions, guys, before we move forward? Arzu, again, producing food is important, but we do not need half the nation to produce the food that Indians need. USA is managing only through 1.4% of our population. Again, your concerns are quite valid. We have to have self-sufficiency and self-reliance in terms of food production, but we do not need half of our population working to do that. Rajul, you'll have to take specific examples. For example, which nation are you talking about? Okay, Ranbir asks, but our industry sector mostly consists of manufacturing primary goods, okay, like steel, aluminium, instead of goods which can be directly sold in the market like automobiles. Does it decrease the contribution of industrial sector? I'm not sure, Ranbir, where you're getting this information from, but India is quite good in terms of producing engineered goods like automobiles. So Tata Motors is selling, Maruti is selling a number of cars outside of India as well. They are quite successful. Arzu, as of now, we are a food surplus nation, right? So again, we can think about exporting food grains as of now, right? Why do developed nations pressure India to abandon its food subsidy programs? What is their benefit? Okay, again a very important question here. If India keeps on giving subsidies to consumers, right, then what happens is India, although the production costs in India are very high, but still people in India will buy Indian goods only. But when you talk about fair trade, right, fair trade, what should happen ideally is, if India is getting food grains at a cheaper cost from outside of India, it should ideally be importing, right? So over here the problem exists with the developed nations. What they want is India to start importing if it is costing them less from outside, or importing from them. So that is their benefit. That is why they are against our subsidies. Yes, as far as pulses are concerned, India is not self-sufficient. India has to import from other countries. And of course, pulses are very important for Indians because a huge majority of Indians are vegetarians, and pulses are the biggest source of proteins for them, right? So pulses we have to import. Okay, let's move on. So just take a screenshot of this particular slide. These are certain important initiatives that you will be Googling on your own. Guys, quickly take a screenshot. I'll move forward after this. Next, an important initiative, important concept related to agriculture, that is microfinance. Now, agriculture or our farmers are a very different kind of customers when you talk about banking. So banking are a very high risk profile kind of a banking customer. Firstly, because 65% of our arable land is dependent on rainfall, right? So there is no irrigation facilities available over here. So that is one problem with the farmers. Secondly, farmers need loans of smaller amounts and maybe twice or thrice in a year. Thirdly, they need loans for a very short duration of time, for example, for sowing 3 or 4 months, harvesting 1 or 2 months, etc. So this kind of a profile of a customer makes it very difficult for our traditional banks to give them loans. So that is why a space is created for microfinancing institutes. So microfinance institutes, they focus on low income clients or solidarity lending groups, including consumers and the self-employed who traditionally lack access to banking and related services. The next profile is the borrowers are from the low income group. Again, this is something that you need to Google, Mudra Bank and Mudra Yojana, right? This is more of factual in nature, so I'm skipping this part, but Mudra is Yojana is related to microfinancing in the country, right? The kind of loans that they want are short duration loans, as I said earlier. Loans are offered without collaterals or securities, and loans are generally taken for income generation purposes. So as far as again guys, please take a snapshot of this particular slide. I'll be covering 1991 reforms shortly, but other things you can just read more about them. For example, what are the new initiatives taken in railways, dedicated freight corridors, DMIC, etc. Again, certain details about Make in India, they are very important. Moving on, we talk about economic reforms in India. So these were major structural reforms which were introduced in the year 1991, and it introduced certain far-reaching changes as far as the structure of our economy is concerned. Before 1991, our economy was characterized by the dominance of the public sector in industrial activity. This particular aspect of our economy, it was taken away, and greater space was created for the private sector to participate even in the industrial activities. Next, there were a lot of discretionary controls on industrial investments and capacity expansion, which is also known as license Raj. So if a producer wanted to establish a factory, he had to go and seek a permission from the government. If I wanted to expand the capacity of my factory, again another permission. If I want to produce, now I was producing X product, now I want to produce Y product as well, again another license. So this created a lot of hurdles in industrial activity as far as India is concerned, and this particular license Raj was removed under the reforms of 1991. Before 91, we had a lot of trade and exchange rate controls. India was an inward looking economy, a protectionist sort of an economy. So we had very high import duties because we wanted to conserve our foreign exchange reserves. So these limitations or these barriers to trade were also removed in the 1991 reforms. Next is limited access to foreign investment. India was again a closed economy, so we did not allow any kind of FDI or FII to come into the country. So again, these limitations were also removed as far as the 91 reforms are concerned. Right, so this is related to globalization, right? Trade and exchange control is related to liberalization, and removal of dominance of public sector is related to privatization. So LPG reforms. So one important question Shekhar has raised, why MSME is being promoted? Because a large number of our laborers are actually employed in the MSME sector. This is the sector which most of our businessmen are involved in, so that is why we want to promote more and more of MSMEs. Again guys, take a snapshot here, slide 18. I'm not sure what do you want. Maybe you want this one. Guys, please be quick in taking snapshots, right? Okay, moving on. Please take a screenshot of this. You have to know the FDI limits for which particular sectors they have been raised recently. For example, telecom, insurance, defense equipments, defense, railway, manufacturing, etc. These are certain important terms. Okay, I'm moving forward. Next, two very important terms: foreign direct investment, or FDI. These are investments made by a foreign individual or a company in the productive capacity of another country. So these are long-term economic interests that a company may establish in our country by investing and purchasing land and building a factory to produce some goods and sell them in the country or abroad. Right? It grants the investor control over the acquired asset. Right? So the company who is investing in India in terms of FDI, that company enjoys complete control over the assets. Next is foreign institutional investments, right? These are foreign investors who invest only in our financial markets, for example, the stock market. So when the market is down, they would invest with their money, and once they've realized their profits, they would move out of the country. So they're temporary. FIIs are temporary. FDIs are more permanent in nature. So what we are looking for are more FDI as compared to FIIs. Let's just understand the difference between growth and development. Growth is a quantitative concept. For example, India will be growing at 7.2%. So that particular figure does not really give us the idea of the standard of living in a particular country. So in that sense, development levels are more important to gauge that parameter. So to know about the standard of living, an index has been developed called Human Development Index. Again, I request you to do a bit of Google search on this. What are the parameters that it measures? I'll just broadly tell you. There are three parameters that are covered under Human Development Index. First is health, right? That measures the life expectancy at birth of an individual in a country. Next is education levels. So it measures first the mean years of schooling by adults in a country. Mean years of schooling. That is the first measure. And the second measure is expected years of schooling to be completed by a person who is born in a particular year. Right? And the last one is income. This is measured in terms of GDP at PPP per capita. Right? So I request you to read a little bit more about Human Development Index, and also it is very important for you to know the latest ranks of India as far as HDI is concerned. So moving on, I'm sure you've all gone through the budget. So these are terms which are very important as far as the budget was concerned. Fiscal deficit and current account deficit. We don't have the time to study them in detail, but broadly speaking, fiscal deficit is related to when the government expenditure exceeds its revenue. So government, when it's spending more as compared to what it's earning, that is a situation related to fiscal deficit, right? So these figures, now you have newer ones, so I request you to go through them as far as the budget is concerned. Current account deficit is, when broadly speaking, when imports exceed exports and includes foreign transfers like remittances, etc. as well. So again, update these figures from the new budget. I'm cutting these out. I'm not aware, I can't recall the exact figures of FD and CAD as far as the latest budget is concerned. So I request you to go through that, or when you have a special session on budget, so you'll be updated in that. Next is a very important concept, that is inflation. broadly speaking, we all understand inflation as a rise in the general level of prices of goods and services in an economy over a period of time. Right. So inflation, as far as any economy is concerned, is caused by three major factors. Right. First one is cost push inflation. This is when the cost of raw material rises. So for example, recently you've been seeing upward revision of diesel and petrol prices. That is because the cost of raw material, that is crude oil, that is continuously rising. So that is cost push inflation. Next is demand pull inflation, when due to any reason the demand for a particular good increases in an economy. So for example, if there is a disaster, there would natural disaster, and so that would increase the demand of, let us say, medicines, etc. for the injured. And the third one is structural inflation. Third one is structural inflation. Now structural inflation is as such related to increasing cost due to lack of infrastructure. So for example, if I have to if I am producing something in, let us say, Gurgaon or Gurugram rather, and sending it to the northeastern states, Manipur, Tripura, etc. So per unit cost of whatever I am producing may be less than the per unit transportation cost, because there are no good railway links till connecting Gurugram till Tripura. So that would lead to higher costs, that would lead to inflation as well. Okay, broadly speaking, we'll just broadly understand monetary policy. Otherwise, the tools of monetary policy would be covered in another lecture, that is banking sector in India. Right. So monetary policy is a policy which is made by the Reserve Bank of India, that is the central bank of the country. It is mainly related to decisions which increase or decrease the money supply in the country. So you have various tools like repo rate, reverse repo rates, under which the banks control the money supply in the country. Right, guys, that brings me to the end of this presentation. I'll take your questions now. Nishant, there are two measures of calculating or measuring inflation. One is WPI and another one is CPI. WPI is wholesale price index, CPI is consumer price index. Now, as far as these two measures are concerned, they look at goods they classify goods in three different categories. So there are primary goods, there are manufactured goods, and there are goods related to fuel. Right, primary goods, manufactured goods, and fuels. So both WPI and CPI have different categories of goods which are classified under these categories. I am not going into details of that. That is not important as far as your GDs and VATs are concerned. But this is the broad idea. Santosh, how inflation and interest rate is interconnected? Okay, very interesting question. Let's see how both of them are interconnected. So when you talk about money supply is the money that people in India have in their pockets, or money which is in circulation. When the money supply increases, right? When the money supply increases, then the disposable income of people, that is money that they have in their pockets, it also increases. When this increases, the demand increases, right? And consequently, we see inflation, right? Now money supply can be decreased by increasing the interest rates, right? So when RBI increases the repo rates, the cost at which the banks can borrow funds from RBI, that also increases. So banks would consequently shift those increased costs to their customers, meaning the rate of interest for various banks would rise. So if the rate of interest will rise, then people will take less number of loans and the reverse action would happen. So when money supply is decreased by increasing the repo rate of the economy, the disposable income decreases, demand decreases, and we see a reducing inflation or disinflation. Okay, Rajul, FDI is when a foreign company like Nike or Coca-Cola establishes a factory in India. So for example, today only Apple has said that it will be manufacturing in India, right? So that is FDI. When a foreign company establishes a factory over here. FII is when a foreign company invests its money only in the stock market in India, right? And it invests its money and it moves out or takes out its money or sells the shares when it is satisfied with the profit that it has earned. So FDI is for a long term, FII is generally for a short period of time. Akash, no, it's not necessary that current account deficit is always unfavorable. Very recently, in 3 quarters ago, India saw a positive current account deficit because our import bill came down drastically because the oil prices went down quite well, but our exports were pretty much stable. So for a very short period of time, India saw a positive current account, which is called current account surplus. So Mr. 25160, sir, despite excess money supply, post demonetization our country had deficit. Okay, after demonetization, money supply actually went down because although our banks had a lot of money with them, but again people did not have any money left in their pockets, so money supply actually went down. That is why the problems were created. Nishant asks, sir, does the company investing through FDI acquire shares? No, Nishant, through FDI the company is establishing a branch in India and not just acquiring a share of XYZ, some other company. Ankush, absolutely not. Stock market is, for example, a foreign individual, an NRI buying shares of Reliance, of Godrej, etc. Right? So that is FII. FDI is not done through stock markets. So Saif, why should taxpayers' money be used to recapitalize banks? Again, a very important topic, a controversial topic as well. The banks themselves have got themselves into this hole, so why should we pull them out as taxpayers? But you have to understand, banking industry, banking sector is very critical for the success of an economy. If our large banks like SBI, even if any one of them fail or they suffer a slowdown, they pull the economic growth down. So we have to take care of our banks. They are in fact public sector banks. They are not privately owned banks. So the government is shifting its money from one head to its own company. So that is quite acceptable and required as well. Ravi Karan, can you discuss the difference between CAD and fiscal deficit? CAD is current account deficit is related to when our imports are more than our exports. Fiscal deficit is a more domestic concept. So domestically, when our revenues are lesser than expenditure, for example, revenues domestically we get from taxes, fines, challans, etc. If that is less as compared to our domestic expenditure in a year, for example, salaries, subsidies, defense expenditure, etc. Right? I hope that clears it up. Samarth, will an acquisition of an Indian company by a foreign firm be an FII? Okay guys, I think you're having some confusion as far as FDI and FII are concerned. Absolutely not. If a foreign company is acquiring an Indian company, that would amount to an FDI, not an FII. So Saif is asking a very important question, a bad bank. So again, this is related more to the budget, so I think it would be more appropriate if you ask this question over there. Ravi Karan, as far as the technical differences are concerned, they're not very important for your GDs and VATs. These are two indices which are measuring the performance of the manufacturing sector and the entrepreneurial business in India, right? So that is enough for an understanding at this stage. Ankush, if certain percentage of FDI is only allowed and the company is listed, then how will foreign entity invest? For example, in insurance sector, the FDI limit is 49%. What that means is, any foreign company who wants to establish an insurance company in India, what it would have to do, it will have to collaborate with an Indian company, right? And that Indian company would always be a majority stakeholder, that is 51%, and 49% can be owned by the foreign entity, right? Now the question is, if this particular entity is listed, then how does more foreign investment come within this? Now, foreigners can purchase the share only out of this particular portion, and only can purchase up till that limit that foreigners would always have less than 49% of ownership. Rajul, no, FDI does not mean only in infrastructure. We have large software companies like Accenture, Cognizant, right? They are FDIs, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, right? They are FDIs, but not in the manufacturing sector. Ankush, you are confusing two things. When you list a company, that is, you list it in the primary market. If you purchase share, that is a secondary market that you're dealing with, right? In any which case, what I've explained you is enough. The ownership of foreign entities cannot increase by more than or go above 49%, right? Okay, Rajul, okay, Shubham, does RBI function independent of the government? Again, Shubham, very important. Ideally, RBI should be functioning independent of the government, but in recent times, we've seen a lot of interference as far as RBI autonomy is concerned, right? Otherwise, RBI is established as an autonomous body which is independent of the government. Okay, guys, any more questions? Slide number 18. Okay, is this what you want, Akash? Okay, any more question, guys? Okay, I think I missed a few questions. Suppose one Indian is having 25%, another at 26%, and one foreign company having 49%. Is it okay? Foreign company can then become head. Rajul, no, the foreign company has to form a partnership with one particular Indian company which will be a majority stakeholder. The foreign company would not have management control over the company in case of insurance. So of course telecom has 100% FDI allowed. A foreign company like Vodafone can come ahead and enjoy complete managerial control as well. Okay guys, any more questions related to this particular PPT? Rajul, soon you will be getting a notification regarding the budget session. Rohit, I'm not aware of when that particular session will be held, but definitely it will be held in a couple of days, and you'll be getting a notification on your apps or emails or Facebook updates, etc. Guys, I think we're done with the questions. So, okay, thank you so much, guys. Hope you found this helpful, and keep preparing, keep studying hard. I'm sure you'll all get all your dream colleges. Absolutely. Okay, thank you very much.